When I was about 10 years old, I lived in Massachusetts and had one brother and one sister. My dad's grandmother, who was my great-grandmother, lived down in Florida. My parents decided to take a trip down to visit her as we hadn't seen her in a long time. She lived in a small house that was set back a little further into the woods, and she didn't have any immediate neighbors. The house was built in the early 1900s, but it was nice. She was really old, and being a young boy, I thought she was a little creepy due to some of the things that she had in and around her house, but it was probably due to it just being a different area and surroundings that I wasn't used to. Well, anyways, as I mentioned, she had a very small house and there weren't a lot of rooms, so the three of us kids had to sleep in a small guest room that only had one big bed. Now, I should mention, I think that one of the things that made it so creepy is that at night it was really dark and quiet, so if you woke up in the middle of the night, it was like being in a pitch-black closet. My great-grandmother never left any lights on once she went to bed, so if I fell asleep beforehand, then I was fine, as long as I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. Otherwise, I'd be paralyzed with fear because I didn't like the dark. On the third night that we were there, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up to my sister screaming at the top of her lungs, wailing around under the covers and crying like I'd never seen her cry before. Of course, I was woken up out of a deep sleep in the pitch dark and had no idea what was going on, so my heart was racing like I just ran a marathon, and my brother was also in the same state of shock as I was. After about 10 seconds, my parents came running into the room and turned on the lights and tried to calm down my sister. They told her that she was just having a nightmare and that everything would be all right. She proceeded to tell us that she was dreaming and felt something touching her foot at the end of the bed, but she couldn't make out what it was and that it was just a dark, creepy-looking figure. She also said that it was saying the word smile over and over again in a low, creepy whisper. She was so scared that she couldn't move or anything and felt paralyzed, and then after a few minutes she was able to scream. She said that she saw the figure go out the window and then she woke up. At this point, we were all looking at each other and then over at the open window, and the creepiest part of this whole thing is that none of us had opened that window the night before. When I was about 16 years old, we moved to a new house, and like most 16-year-olds, it was an exciting time of life. I didn't really care for moving away from all my good friends and leaving high school, but I tried to look on the bright side of things and figured it would be a new experience, and I'd meet a lot of new people, etc., etc. The house we moved into was pretty nice, and it was in a nice area. Everything was going well until about after the first month we moved in. I started having bad dreams and nightmares. I didn't know why or what it was due to, except for maybe all the new changes that were going on in my life. I never really had a lot of nightmares except for maybe the normal one or two here and there, but it seemed like it was getting worse and worse until it turned into sleep paralysis, where you wake up and you're completely paralyzed and can't move. I had heard about sleep paralysis but didn't think it was a real thing since I had never experienced it before, plus I was young. I would wake up and it would feel like I have a really heavy weight on my chest, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't move at all. At first, that's all it was. It's not like I was seeing anything bad, just the heaviness and the not being able to move. I told my parents about it, and we looked into it, and I guess it was something you just kind of grow out of over time. We found out that it's a disorder, and a lot of people believe it's some kind of a demonic experience. One of the names people call it is the old hag syndrome. I guess it's pretty common, and there are a number of people that experience it at different times throughout their life. What it comes down to is it's the person's inability to move smoothly throughout the stages of sleep. I think I would have been better off not knowing any of this, because now when I went to bed, I'd have it on my mind even more than ever. As time went on, it was getting worse and worse. It started out with me just seeing small shadows here and there, to hearing weird noises and bumps and bang sounds in the night. Eventually it got to the point where I was just plain literally scared to death. One night I woke up and I was on my back and I couldn't move. Out of the corner of my eye I could see a dark figure over in the right far corner of my room, and it just stood there for the longest time, but then eventually started moving towards my bed. The worst part about it is that it was moving toward me very slowly, which in a way was fine because I didn't want it near me, but at the same time I didn't know what it was going to do. At this point, I just wanted to wake up and have it all be over with. I could feel my heart racing and the heavy weight on my chest and could just about breathe. As the figure got closer, I could now see that it was an old woman who was dressed in some kind of a torn black cloak. She had weird-looking hands and long, scraggly gray hair. Her face was cold and clammy-looking, and she had cuts on her forehead and cheeks. At first, she was making this really creepy sound like a high-pitched tone, but then started saying something in some kind of a weird demonic language. When she or it got closer to the foot of my bed, it started floating into the air and ended up over top of me. I was trying my hardest to move, but I still couldn't, and then I heard the really high-pitched sound coming from her again. And as she got closer to me, it got louder and louder, and then she just vanished into the dark. I have never until that day or since then been more scared of anything in my life. When I was younger, I used to have 4 different reoccurring nightmares, and I guess from what they say, they mean something in real life. The first one, for example, is I would wake up but still be sleeping and find myself at the very top of a giant flagpole type of pole, hanging on for dear life, and the pole was high as the Empire State Building and even higher sometimes. I was scared to death of heights, so I guess this is why I would occasionally have this nightmare. While it was happening, it would be very windy, and the giant pole would be swaying back and forth. All I could think of was that the pole was eventually going to snap, and I'd fall all that way back down. It was so far up that when I looked down, it literally looked like you were looking at a map. It was very disturbing. The second nightmare I would sometimes have is I'd seem to wake up and find myself sleepwalking. I'd end up downstairs in a pitch-dark basement closet over in the corner, but I wouldn't remember going down there, so to me, I was away in some dark place somewhere that I don't remember going to. And the worst part about it is I couldn't get out. I'd be in that situation for what seemed like an eternity. Eventually, a light would come on, and I would hear my mother's voice telling me that I was sleepwalking and that I'm in our basement. They would eventually come to help me after hearing me screaming. It was also very disturbing as well. The third type of nightmare I would sometimes have is someone would be chasing me. I don't know who or what it was, but they'd always be 3 to 4 feet behind me. I'd be running as fast as I possibly could, and they would never catch me, but they were always right there behind me, ready to grab me. Every once in a while, I'd get a glimpse of the dark figure. It was very big and would be breathing heavily as it ran after me. I could also make out that it had some kind of a knife or long blade of some sort. I knew if it caught me, it would be all over, so I always ran as hard as I possibly could. When I finally woke up, I would be sweating and breathing really heavily. It scared me to death. The fourth most disturbing nightmare in my mind is this one. I'd be sleeping, and in my bedroom, the closet was on the other side of the room. It was a rectangular room, so the top of my bed was against the wall, and the closet door was on the opposite side of the room. So if I was laying on my back and looked down at my feet and across the room, that's where the door was. Now, I'll admit it, I was kind of afraid of the dark, so I'd leave the hall light on when I went to bed each night, but after I fell asleep, my mother would turn the light off before she went to bed. So if I woke up in the middle of the night, it would be pitch dark, and then it being the middle of the night, it was also very quiet. So this one night I looked over at the closet door, and I knew it was coming. I could feel my heart beating 1,000,000 miles an hour and hear my breathing getting heavier, but at the same time trying to be quiet so as not to bring any attention to myself. Then all of a sudden, I heard a light scratch from the inside of the door. I laid there praying for it to go away, but after a few minutes the door opened very slowly, and I knew it, not because I could clearly see it, because it was so dark, but I could hear the low quiet creak. I kept thinking to myself that maybe I should just jump out of bed and run over to the light switch and turn it on, but the only problem was the switch was on the wall near the closet door, so there's no way I was going to do that, so I just stayed under my covers. I could hear whatever it was slowly crawling across the rug on the floor over towards my bed, so I kept trying to slowly look on the right and left side of my bed to see if I could see anything. The seconds felt like hours as I waited. Then all of a sudden, I could feel the cover slowly being pulled off from the end of my bed. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, and 3 seconds later my father came running into the room and turned the light on, but whatever it was gone.